Alright, hit the button. Alright, so, yeah, I guess we'll do this and then we'll get to the two slit. I'll just read some of these comments first. I guess it's just an overview. Look, the point of me bringing up the two slit experiment is just to point out how it's being misdescribed by physics. That's the fundamental point. Now, the exact mechanism, okay, that's subject to interpretation. But I'm just pointing out how it's not described as it is when it's described to the public. So if you can show me a video where somebody who has any kind of like, the BBC or PBS or the Science Channel, any one of those, any high-profile physicist who is accurately describing the single slit and double slit circumstance, link me to that video. I'm arguing that none of them describe it accurately, and that's physics shouldn't be doing that. That's the accusation. So again, defend the physicist. Don't argue that I'm a criminal because I'm bringing it up, that they're not describing it accurately. You won't admit they're describing it inaccurately? That's your prerogative. Oh, this comment is much longer than I thought. Oh, dearie me. Yeah, you probably can't see it, so I'll just read it. Go ahead, draw me a picture of this three-dimensional bent space, and Mendham taunts. It's not a taunt. It's stated for a reason, okay? Einstein's supposed to be creating a model of bent space and time, and I'm saying the model doesn't work, because as soon as you do try to three-dimensionalize it, you'll realize the energy problem. The energy problem will be back. In 2 dimensions it works because our brain intuitively adds gravity to make it work. They even do it on purpose. They bend a big piece of rubber in a swimming pool and then roll balls around in it. You don't see how they're using gravity to model gravity. I mean, sorry, but that's sort of a huge cheat, isn't it? And I'm just saying, when you try to three-dimensionalize the model, it becomes a convergence again. It becomes a vacuum cleaner. And the logical question is, where's the energy for the vacuum cleaner coming from? And you don't have an answer to that question, and so you're going to throw rocks at me. I'm just going to say, fuck you for that. There's no reason we should have to even be able to draw a picture of things the way they really are. Well, again, don't claim you have a model then. Don't use it as a model. Don't pretend it is a model when it isn't. That's remarkably presumptuous of humans to suppose that our highly contingent built-in ways of directly perceiving the world match up with it perfectly. Well, I'm just saying that obviously microscopes and telescopes do a pretty good job of rendering reality. So to argue that you can't make models that accurately model something, I think it's just a cop-out. But we have managed to extend our ability to represent and thus perceive things by thinking. Yes, and exactly. I've done some thinking, and if you understand Einstein's bent space in 3 dimensions, you end up with a convergence. You end up with a fucking vacuum cleaner, and I'm saying, where's the motor? And that is what bent space involves. Now, bent space involves finding a fake dimension to account for energy. It's a contrivance. It's a cheat. One can easily represent bent space in higher dimensional space. Well, whatever higher dimensional space is. So again, you just create things, right? We have up, down, forward, back, left, right. You say there's a higher dimensional space. I don't see any evidence of it at all. So, isn't the burden of proof on you? You're saying the extraordinary leprechaun space exists. Higher dimensional space. You might as well just say leprechaun space, because frankly you don't have one single piece of evidence for this higher dimensional space. Or one can represent it more abstractly simply by defining the distance relation. Well, it's not about distance at 3 dimensions. It's about a sucking sound at 3 dimensions. I'm just saying, if you don't use the cheat of 2 dimensions and start bending things, you're stuck with extra distance being created out of extra velocity, and extra velocity has to be accounted for as some kind of extra, Okay, energy. There is no reason the actual distance relation in space should be the absolutely simple, pure Euclidean one we feel that we experience and develop our first simple formal models of. Well, that's just so easy to say. Okay, so there's no reason for me to think life forms have to be human. Yes, they can be leprechaunish. Says you. I'm saying no, they really can't. You don't have a theory of leprechaun creation. Where's the evolution of the leprechaun? Where did you get the energy to make your leprechauns? Where's the gingerbread? Where's the magic? Minnan probably can't do the formal math. Well, fuck you. But perhaps he could try imaging that he is merely a two-dimensional being living in a flat plane. Well, again, I have absolutely no reason to sit there and reduce the number of dimensions I know exist. So there's absolutely no point in me sitting there saying, let me try to two-dimensionalize myself and then try to one-dimensionalize myself. That seems to me to be a preposterous waste of my goddamn time. Then imagine that actually he could be living on the surface of a sphere. Well, again, you do whatever the fuck you want. All right, play all these silly games. I'm saying time is not a dimension. Space is not a dimension. They're not left, right, forward, back, up, down. They're nothing like that. They're functions in left, right, up, down, forward, back. That's what space and time are. They're things that happen in the real dimensions. They're not separate dimensions. It is still two-dimensional, but now bent or curved, whatever. If the sphere is large, he might never realize he is living on the surface of a sphere. Well, the point is that the three dimensions kind of create the sphere in the first place. It creates this idea of a sphere. And if you really understand what the dimensions are actually representing, which are these quadrants, and if you add those up, it ends up being the trajectories will create your sphere for you, or your cube. But regardless, the point is that all this abstraction bullshit doesn't fit with any rational geometry. So you're just creating an irrational geometry to pretend you're doing physics in. Okay, and I'm saying there is no irrational geometry. You want to pretend there is? Okay, go ahead and pretend there is. Pretend there's a fourth dimension. Go ahead. I can't stop you, but I'm just going to call it what it is, which is daydreaming. It's leprechaun talk. It's bullshit. And all the straight lines would actually be bent. Again, this is just a silly abstraction. It doesn't exist in reality. So you can't model this in anything called reality. So I'm just saying, what do you want me to say? Go ahead. Have sex with Bugs Bunny. I don't care. Now the real world perhaps is something like that, except three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. Well, it's nothing like what you whatever. It's silly. Seems to be very little imagination being employed here. Yeah, right. At least I have enough imagination to recognize that if you take their statements to their conclusion, it doesn't work. I mean, obviously I had to apply a little bit of imagination to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to fall for these gravitational lensing images. I had to have enough imagination to realize, oh, wait a minute, the implications of what they're saying is that the gravity at that location is over 100 meters per second, which means in 28 days that star will be moving the speed of light. I had enough imagination to do that. Go ahead and draw me a picture. Well, use this simple or learn the math. Well, again, math, as I've stated, is just another way of modeling things in a way where you don't have to make a real model. So, and the capacity to make errors in math is, in my opinion, manifestly obvious. Your formulas have to be carefully written, or you create silly things like singularities, where you take the entire universe and cram it onto the head of a pin, even though there's absolutely no evidence you can do that to real energy. Alright, or learn some math and learn a little about three manifolds in general. No, I'm not going to do that. Alright, I'm not going to waste my time studying Bugs Bunny's shoes. Sorry, math is tough. Physics is tough. Sorry, you're a pompous asswipe to say something stupid like that, okay? I've pointed out real mistakes being made, and that's the best you can do. I've pointed out the real fact, okay, that Einstein's explanation of the convergence is just an excuse to run away from the obligation to explain the energy component. You want to keep pretending the Earth can move into the sun and it doesn't require energy. Go ahead and pretend that. Everywhere else in the universe, if something happens, somebody says, where's the energy? You can't get this stuff for free. Physicists argue with people who say there's perpetual energy because they make the simple point, where's it coming from, cunt? But no, it's you can have all the energy you want, just bend some fucking space and you can move fucking planets. Sorry, no sale. Sorry. Reality is tough, fucker. Get a clue. Frankly, Emendem stuff is an insult to those people. Again, they're, in my opinion, insulting me. Okay, physicists are insulting my intelligence when they pretend, okay, that the two-slit experiment means something, and then they use a single slit and throw tennis balls through it and say, "Look how they just clump over there." That's insulting my fucking intelligence, cunt. All right, these people are pretending they know something. They're smarter than me, and yet they're using examples that are obviously misrepresenting the truth. So again, don't acknowledge the real criminals. Instead, make me a criminal for pointing out they're thieves. Fuck you. I mean, it's just scapegoating. I'm guilty because I'm pointing out that your fucking naked emperor is fucking naked. You stupid shit. Smear. Emendem stuff is an insult to those people who want to try to learn some real math and physics with the limited time and energy they have. Well, I can't, frankly, I just can't be bothered playing this who's doing what kind of game. I'm honestly expressing what I've honestly discovered, what I honestly think, and I'm showing examples of it. I can't do any better than that, you cunt. Now, you want to claim I'm lying about something, or I'm cheating the facts somehow, I think that's an accusation you should defend with a piece of fucking evidence. And you haven't done that, you fucking little lying cunt bear. There is absolutely... Bears probably have really small penises. There is absolutely nothing stupid, idiotic, or fraudulent, etc. about the idea of bent or curved space. Well, it is in the sense, like I said, you're taking the energy it takes to move planets, hurl them into the sun. A huge amount of energy, and instead of accounting for it, you're just saying, let's throw it over there in a fake dimension where we don't have to account for it. And so you say that's not cheating. I'm saying it's cheating. The most energy, the thing is consuming the most energy in our the known universe, and you're sweeping them under the bent space rug. Just because Emendem cannot imagine it. Well, again, I can imagine it. I'm saying imagine it in 3 dimensions, and then it ends up being everything's pulling on magical ropes. I have a magical rope. I'm the sun. I have a magical rope tied to the earth, and I'm going to pull on the magical rope forever and pull the earth into me forever with my magical forever arm strength. Anyway, imagine it. And unlike what he says elsewhere, using curved space to explain gravity is not some kind of begging the question. Well, I'm sorry, it is. Cheating of using gravity to explain gravity. It is when it's drawn in 2 dimensions, that's clear. And if they never used a 3-dimensional illustration, because a 3-dimensional illustration will force them to say, why does the vacuum cleaner inside the sun endlessly suck? Endlessly. Because this theory sucks. That's why. I imagine that he thinks that's because, based on his hand gesticulations, he has so again, you're just going to slander me some more, right? So yes, I deserve ridicule because I'm pointing out that the creating a fake dimension to account for the most substantial energy consumption in the universe is kind of bogus. Based on his hand gesticulations, he has sent some model with 2-dimensional rubber sheet holding a bowling ball, which induces a curve in space similar that smaller balls would fall because of the 3-dimensional gravity of our world in which the model is embedded. But this is just a simple heuristic device to help beginners visualize the ideas. Well, if you're starting them off with a fake notion that your bent space is accounting for something that it's not accounting for, when it's obviously using gravity to display gravity, it clearly can't be a model of gravity if it needs gravity to function. In reality, I mean, it's just like saying I'm going to explain leprechauns by having leprechauns draw pictures of leprechauns. In reality, it is all about the distance metric in the space. Well, again, you say there's this distance metric, okay, in this fake dimension you call nothing space, all right, where the nothing space is bent and the material matter somehow is obliged to be obedient to the bent space, and by being obedient to the bent space it bends more space and therefore has to be obedient to the bent space. I mean, you're creating a fake actor that's acting, and then the other actor is responding to the fake actor. And you're saying I've accounted for something. No, that's called God, shithead. Okay? God is, that's what that is. That's just, you're just filling the God gap. And the fact is, without any forces on it, matter moves along straight lines according to the metric. Well, again, according to the graph paper you drew on top of space and then said, I'm going to make it a dimension. Again, I mean, I can't, how do I disprove your leprechaun theory? And that's all it is. You've invented a fake place, a fake universe, and decided that it has a bunch of character and said, okay, it can do this, and it can do that, and it can do that. What's the difference between me just inventing a reptilian entity, and it comes to Earth, and it, it takes over the presidency, and it manipulates this, and it does that? Isn't that the same thing? A completely disprovable theory of magic forces. You're not explaining anything. You're evading the explanation. Alright, so let's get back to the two slits, since the next comment I think is going to be on that. Alright, so there's two, the canard, the biggest canard is the fact that whenever this experiment is explained, it's never explained accurately. So the first thing, the accurate thing to say is the two slit experiment can look the single slit can look two different ways. It can look that way, or it can look like that. It can look like a pattern with a whole bunch of bars. It can look like a pattern with just a couple of bars, based on how wide the slit is. Right? So that's the first. Let's just understand that the number of bars you see has nothing to do with single slit versus two slit. That just has to do with how wide the slit is, and the wider it is, the tighter the diffraction pattern. The narrower the slit, the wider the diffraction pattern, and that's all. All right. Now the dilemma for the two slit is, okay, so this is a single slit of one wavelength. Let's say this is a single slit of two wavelengths wide. All right. So lots of pattern with two wavelengths, hardly any pattern with one wavelength. Now the problem is the two slit experiment is essentially two of these. Right? But if you add this plus this, so this plus this doesn't equal that. Right? The two slit pattern. So you can't just add two slits, and say, okay, I should get double that. And instead you get this. This is what the two slit experiment ends up looking like. So this plus this doesn't equal the two slit. But the single slit, okay, narrow, plus the single slit wide does exactly equal the double slit experiment, in that these bars end up being inside of these bars. And so it ends up being exactly the combination of a narrow slit and a wide slit. So that's the dilemma of the two slit experiment, is that it doesn't add narrow slit, it adds narrow slit, wide slit. So what it's basically doing is these two slits are the wide slit, and these two slits end up being the narrow slit, these two surfaces. So you can sort of see that this is like the single slit narrow, and this is the single slit wide. But obviously that's a block there. That's not a slit. So the question is, what about that difference? And so there's so many ways you could look at this. I mean, just something else I wanted to point out is you always have to remember this thing's being projected. And so anything that doesn't get diffracted ends up going straight to the center. So that's why in the single slit experiment the center maxima is so bright, is because all the undiffracted light, no matter where it goes through, ends up there, right in the center, because this target's very far away relative to the size of these tiny slits. So you always have to remember that any light that doesn't get diffracted ends up here. Doesn't end up over here, ends up dead center. Alright, so here the dead center is completely blocked. So clearly that's why we don't have a big central maxima. Clearly. You know, and the other thing to understand is this double slit pattern is a wavelength off. So where before I said this is two bars wide, it's actually 3 units wide. So that's the deception. So what you're really seeing in the narrow 2-slit experiment is this center is actually a dead space. That's actually a black space in terms of diffraction, but it gets wiped out because the center light goes straight through and wipes out the dark space. So the diffracted light is actually creating a dead space in the middle, and the dead space doesn't show up because it gets wiped out by the center light that goes straight through. So that's the wavelength difference. Alright, so what I would argue is here's a simple way to look at it. Now, there's two ways to look at it. Let's look at it as a voltage issue. So if I have a voltage, say 10,000 volts between 2 plates, and I push the plates apart, that's technically doing work because sort of gravity wants to push them together. You can sort of understand that the plates really want to be together. So if you understand that as a principle, that things want to be together, and I'm using the word want in the completely abstract way, not in any serious way, just as a model, their tendency is to go together. And so you're doing work when you're pushing them apart. And that work is realized in the increase in the voltage. So if I had... Ooh, battery died. Alright, so I think I was at the voltage part, hopefully. So if I had 10,000 volts on a plate, on 2 plates, and I move the plates apart, I'll increase the voltage potential. So it'll go to 11,000, 12,000, 15,000. So I'll increase the voltage by just pulling the plates apart. And I believe that's correct. Now if I stuck something in between the 2 plates, it gets even more complicated, because now the voltages, it won't be the voltage you would expect between 2 plates of that distance. It'll be the voltages on the interior plates, the charge, will end up being higher than the charge on the external plates, which doesn't intuitively make any sense. I believe this is correct. So if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. The point is that it's a little, even with voltages, it gets a little complicated when you put something in between the field. Now with magnets the same kind of crap happens. If I put a magnet in between 2 other magnets, I make the center magnet actually stronger than the external magnets. Okay, and so I'll explain it just as a gravity equation. So here's the 2-slit experiment. Now you could sort of understand that if these were gravitational bodies, the gravity on this surface would certainly just be the single surface gravity, and the gravity on this surface would be this single surface gravity. But the gravity on these 2 surfaces, if it was really gravity, would be a combination of this gravity plus this gravity. So this gravity at this distance, alright, so it would be this surface gravity. Now inverse square rule it to this surface, so there's still like whatever, 10% of it, it'll still be felt here. So 10% of this gravity will end up here, plus the gravity of this thing itself. So, and that's happening on both sides, obviously. So if you just turn it into a gravitational equation, you'll realize that this surface ends up being a much stronger field than the widest field. And that's accounting for this difference. The interior field is doing the single slit diffraction. It has much stronger diffraction. The external field has the liney regular field diffraction of a slit that wide. So this field isn't changed. This field is changed. And that's why it doesn't do this plus this, because it's doing gravity plus gravity, or charge plus charge. Get it? So that's accounting for the change in the diffraction pattern, is because you've changed. It's not, strictly speaking, two single slit experiments. It's one single split wide, okay, with an impediment in the center, which is very different than two slits. It's like me putting plates in between electric charge. It doesn't turn the charge into two separate charges. I don't know if it's the same. Let me think about batteries. If I put batteries in series, that's probably going to get more complicated to explain the voltage changes. But it's it's probably similar kind of effect. If I put 4 AA batteries in series, the charge on each battery isn't going to be the charge of the battery anymore. It's going to be its charge relative to the sequence. Alright, so that's the basic explanation here. You don't need any Huygens, you don't need any of that crap to explain the phenomenon. And my fundamental objection to the two-slit experiment is the fact that it's not described as the single slit experiment, because the single slit is where all the action happens. That's where this diffraction happens. And it's silly not to talk about that in the context of the double slit. And forget about Copenhagen or many worlds or all of that crap, because you don't need any of that stuff. Alright, let's see. So Piro. It's not just like the interference pattern. Yes, it is. Bands of light and dark. Yes, it is. Exactly, bands of light and dark. But not the same places. Yes, well, obviously they're not in the same places because you have an impediment in the center which completely wipes out the center thing. But I'm not even sure, because I found that inaccuracy in the central maxima. They keep saying it's twice as big. It's not twice as big. It's 3 units. Okay, so it's just as big as 1 bright, 1 dead, 1 bright. So yes, that counts as 2 brights, but the 2 brights have a dead space in between. So the central maxima in the single slit is actually 3 units, if you know what I'm saying. A unit would be a band width. So it's 3 bandwidths bigger. And 3 bandwidths will always be 2 brights if you have a dead in the middle. So it's 2 brights wide, but it's really 3 bands wide. Anyway, but not in the same place, not the same amount of light and dark. Well, again, the amount is quite obviously, you can just intuit that the amount is going to change when you block the center light. The amount hitting the target in the center is going to be obviously different. So that's just obvious. Can you elaborate? Don't understand what you're trying to say. So, well, Piro's not going to do any of that. So the bear shows up to fix it. When he says it's not just like, he simply means the patterns are not identical. Well, the argument wasn't that they're identical, and beyond the point that they're identical and that the bandwidths are the same, the dark and the diffraction bands are the same. The only thing that changes is the phase, where they're lined up exactly, and the thickness of that central maxima. Of course they both have bands, but they are different. Well, I don't know what this of course they both have bands part. This is the part I'm objecting to. Show me the popular physics video that explains that they both have the same bands. That the bands are the same width and the same wavelength difference. The bands are of different intensities and occur in different places. Well, again, in the double slit, the intensity is dictated kind of inside of this single slit. So that's the other irony of this thing, is that the double slit isn't this, it's that inside of this. Alright, there is no single slit pattern that is identical to any double slit pattern. Well, I'm just saying the fringes are identical. So if you just cut the fringes off and push them together, you have the same pattern. What the single slit pattern looks closest to is the mathematical prediction of what will happen when a wave goes through a single slit. Well, that's just a lie, okay? So I don't know what to say to you, okay? You will not duplicate this pattern with water waves. No fucking way. With a single opening in water waves, you will not get this pattern ever. No matter how wide you make the slit, you're not going to get that pattern. So you can keep lying, but it ain't going to happen. That's the double slit pattern. Looks closest to the mathematical prediction of what will happen when a wave goes through two slits. Well, again, water waves only match in the double slit. They don't match in the single slit. So you can keep saying they do, but they don't. So let's see. You're after a fine laser. How fine are DVD lasers? They use a lens. See, and I can't, if I, obviously if I use a lens, you end up with this stupid, you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, if I use a focus, the problem's going to be is you focus, here, trying to get your small beam, and obviously what happens is your light's doing this thing, so, you're fucked. So you can't, you have to have an actual laser that's fine. I can't have a focused laser. And I think DVD players are just using a focused laser. It won't work for my purposes. Yes, there is interference theoretically in all wave fronts. Well, again, so that's your argument. So Firo's saying all waves are not really waves. They're all a tiny bunch of little waves. And I'm sure inside of each one of those tiny little waves is another Huygens. And so there's a million little waves inside of that, and then there's a little million waves inside of that, and then a million waves inside of that, and then you see the problem with this bullshit. You create a synthetic. First you turn light into a wave, which it's not, some sort of fakey wavy thing that a photon is. So you create a synthetic wave. Then you say the synthetic wave has 7 zillion fake little waves coming out of it. Why can't I just say, well then I guess there's 7 zillion little waves coming out of each one of those little wavelets then, true, right? I mean, it's just a bullshit. It's a canard. Let's see, keeps it a front. That's still different than the interference pattern between two diffraction patterns. Well, again, the interference pattern between two diffraction patterns can be explained without creating multiverses and without this nonsense that the photon splits in half and does all this bullshit. It doesn't do any of that bullshit, which is interference squared. And obviously there's no squared interference in this pattern. The pattern is quite simply the combination of this plus this. It clearly is just narrow slit plus wide slit. If you took those two patterns, superimposed them, that's the double slit. Not complicated. You don't need no magic photons to create that. The interference pattern is interference between two diffraction patterns. That interference also plays a role in diffraction. Well, duh. I don't know how exactly the interference plays a role in diffraction. All waves interfere when they cross. Well, I don't know how they exactly cross. They have to have two photons to cross, including the parts of a wave deflected by a barrier edge, whatever that means. I mean, we're really not talking about barrier waves in water against barriers are completely not like photons and barriers, unless you make the barriers very large. Piro, I think you should be clear here to distinguish between what I believe most people are referring to when they say diffraction and interference pattern, which are visually apparent patterns of light and dark bands on the screen, right? Well, the light and dark is diffraction. That's all you need. On the one hand, and the actual waves that are producing those patterns on the other hand. Well, again, these theoretical entities, right? I.e. theoretical entities that are inferred to exist permeating throughout space. So the interference patterns comes about from the interference not between two diffraction patterns, but from two waves that are diffracted by two slits. Well, gee, that was really helpful. Yes, that's fair to point out that as fact there is one pattern, but it's the sum of two patterns that each slit would produce. well, again, it's two patterns, but it's not each slit is producing. It's the surfaces that are producing it, and I can explain why surfaces are different, not only in magnetism and electricity, but in gravity. So I can explain why this surface is different than this surface. That it's not a combination of two slits, it's a combination of a narrow and a wide. Anyway, empirically, with a single slit, you observe a certain kind of pattern of light and dark on the screen, and with a double slit, you observe a different but similar pattern, of course. Well, I mean, what do you want me to say? I mean, I'm arguing that they don't say that in all of the explanations of the two-slit experiment. Not one of you won't find one document. Show me the documentary that accurately says that. Show it to me. The point is, how can one account for these patterns? I'm saying there's lots of ways to account for them, and you don't need to create fake waves and then fake wavelets. Can one give a precise model that will explain the precise pattern that is achieved, at least in idealized situations? The facts are, assuming that the pattern was produced by a wave of a certain frequency will enable one to mathematically deduce in both a single and double slit cases, as well as in a triple slit and quadruple slit. Again, these are all experiments that basically are, first you have a wide field, a narrower field, a narrower field. I mean, can't you understand that this could just be field dynamics? You know, let's make a whole bunch of slits. And what do you have when you have a whole bunch of slits? Well, you have this field, and you have this field, and then you have this field. You get that? They're fields. Local field, wider field, widest field. And that field dynamic is applicable to charge, okay, electricity, and magnetism. So you're not asking these questions there. Nobody even asked the question when it comes to Newton's aperture, for fuck's sake. You got Newton's ring with a single aperture that you just make small and you get all these rings. Nobody needed a phantasmagorical explanation for that. Diffraction. The point is, how can you account for these patterns, give a precise model, blah, blah. Here's one. Single, double slit cases in the pattern, and one sees this is a purely, oh, fuck, it's... Oh, fuck. 6 years of shit here. This is purely mathematical fact about waves. Well, you keep saying there's a mathematical fact about waves, and I'm going to argue there's no fucking way you're going to duplicate the single slit experiment with water waves. No chance. In all cases, two things happen. I mean, there is no Huygens, there is no bullshit, so do it with water waves, and you do it for the rest of your life, and you're never going to realize the pattern with a whole bunch of lines in it. Ain't going to happen. First, the frequency that one uses to deduce the observed pattern of light and dark is the same frequency with a range that the photons and electrons... Well, look, that's already... The frequency you're not going to change, but it's using the same color light, so yeah, duh. Based on the Planck-Einstein relation for photons and the Bogey extension of the applied to electrons. Well, again, that's just irrelevant to this whole thing. Obviously, the presumption is you're using monochromatic light, so it's just, you know, one color for both experiments. Second... It is known that even a single photon or electron are sent through either... I mean, look, the difference in the color of the lights just changes, you know, a tiny bit of the phase change. That's all it does. It affects the phase a little tiny bit. Second, it's known that even if single photons or electrons were sent through either one slit or the two slits one by one, the pattern predicted by the wave theory will still be... Again, your wave theory. There's no wave theory applicable to the single slit, so just keep saying there is and there isn't. There's no wave, you asshole! Photons are not a wave! Within a range of experimental errors. So the wave pattern, which can be mathematically proven to be produced by the waves of a given frequency, is being produced by the single photons and electrons of the same frequency. Well, obviously the assumption built into this is that, yes, if they ever did do the fucking experiment, which they've never done, I guess, and put single photons through the single slit, they will get, obviously, the same diffraction pattern as they get when they send multiple photons through. That is strong evidence that both the light and the electrons are exhibiting wave phenomenon. Well, you say it's strong evidence. I'm saying it's no evidence whatsoever, because there's other rational explanations for diffraction, rather than creating some kind of notion that waves create little wavelets and that little wavelets somehow interfere with each other, even though they have a zero net capacity to do that, because they're supposed to stop at the next wavefront. They're not supposed to be going any further than the next wavefront. And you're saying the little wavelets are now the wave. So not only are you saying there's photons aren't photons, they're waves, and that those waves create little wavelets, but you're saying when they get to an obstacle, the little wavelets become the wave, and the old wave is now obliterated, and the little wavelets are now the wave, and now they can interfere. So there's a hell of a lot of mechanical inconsistency here, where certainly you're not going to be able to draw a picture of it that makes any rational sense. A lot of confusion here seems to be the videos and discussion that say, see, when you cover one slit of the two-slit experiment, the interference pattern disappears. Well, that's my argument, okay? There you go. They make it into magic. We know it's not magic. We know that if you cover one of the slits, you'll end up with this pattern. And then if you make, and if you pull the impediment out of the two-slit experiment, if you pull the thing in the middle out, then you'll get this pattern. And that they don't point out. Look, I mean, wouldn't that be even a more interesting thing to do in their little silly documentaries? Well, if you think that's amazing, look at this. When I pull the center impediment out of the two-slit experiment, look, I get even more pattern. Alright, second is know that even, let's see, I don't know. I don't want to even apply this to electrons. I just don't want to be bothered. I mean, let's not confuse. I don't think electrons are an appropriate thing to use, just because electrons, they don't travel in straight lines, and this is just silly to use electrons. So the wave pattern, in which can be mathematically proven to be produced by the waves of given frequency, is produced by a single photon electron. Okay, I was already there. A lot of confusion here. Okay, yeah, well, that is true. Okay, so just concede that first, let's say, have this experiment done, at least honestly described. So let's get up to that level before you oblige me to diagram everything that could be. I'm just saying, let's start from a fair starting point, which is, let's first accurately describe what's fucking happening instead of inaccurately describing it, and then let's see if you can convince people about your silly Huygens and your silly other theories. Okay? Instead of playing this game that you're going to misdescribe the experiment to make it seem like what you're doing isn't wacky. I'm frankly going to argue, when you start telling people that single slits have a zillion waves going through them, I think they're going to start saying, well, isn't that like a leprechaun? The interference pattern then comes from two slits disappear. Of course, the pattern of light bars that happen with just one slit open is still there, but so what? That is exactly what quantum mechanics predicts. Oh, fuck you. I mean, that's such a vacant statement. That's exactly what quantum mechanics predicts. Predicts with what? What formula? Without Huygens, you have nothing. Take away Huygens and you got nothing. You have no explanation. Zero. There's nothing in quantum mechanics that explains it. So without your contrivance, without your fake extra waves, you got nothing. Zero. To explain the single slit diffraction under quantum mechanics. Nothing. The first experiments that confirm the quantum nature, oh, see, now you're going to use quantum. Fuck you. Of electrons, well, fuck electrons. Electrons hate electrons, so quite obviously electrons are incredibly reactive when you shove them anywhere near matter. I mean, fuck. Obviously electrons are completely influenced by any kind of charge or magnetic field, so why are we talking about electrons? They use microscopic diffraction grating, creating a large crystal of nickel. However, the mathematics and analysis required to show that the interference pattern there, that is, the effect of the light in the dark bands, is rather complicated. Well, I'm just saying there's no point. I mean, stick with light. Do the experiment with one or the other. I don't wish to have a conversation about what fucking electrons are doing, because frankly they're wackier than photons. So there's no point in talking about, well, look with the wacky ball. Let's throw wiffle balls through two slits and see what they do. There's no point in throwing wiffle balls, for fuck's sake. the public consumption, plus because the historical connection to Young's much earlier experiments, double slit experiment, therefore easier way to clearly demonstrate the wave-like nature of photons. Well, again, the whole thing is a canard. So you're saying here we've proven the wave-like nature based on the conclusion that was false from the very beginning, which was that there's something magical happening and the photons were going through two slits. Then when you find out there's single slit diffraction after Young, and you say, holy fuck, Young was kind of full of shit because look, there's single slit diffraction, then you have to invent Huygens to create fake waves so now you can still make the waves interfere with each other. I mean, you can't see how this is just dark matter all over again. Back to the Future, I mean, the first invention of dark matter. You're just inventing something to fix your broken math. Fuck. The most proven theory in the history of mankind. Because we keep inventing fake bullshit dimensions and bullshit Huygens waves and bullshit dark matter to fix it. I should add that when I say this is purely mathematical fact about waves, I am taking their word for it, so to speak. Oh, there you go. Great idea. In this conversation, we've basically proven that the highest viewed physics video on YouTube regarding physics and quantum mechanics is absolutely a load of absolute shit. Not a fact in it. And then you're going to say, I'm taking their word for it. I have not worked out for myself that the pattern one sees in the case of light and dark bands is indeed that which is predicted in the wave theory in the case of the one slit. I have worked out that if you assume the Huygens principle, that the wave at the slit is held to be sine at each point in the slit interior at time t, and that you get a traditional pattern that they say. Yes, well, of course, if you arbitrarily create two photons, creating two distinct waves at two distinct locations, you're going to get interference. But that's not what's happening, for fuck's sake. There's no evidence of any two photons. But I haven't formally satisfied myself that Huygens' principle is true. Well, thank you. I think it's too difficult to be worth the trouble for most of us. Well, I think it's pretty motherfucking important. Your whole wave theory of quantum electrodynamics is fundamentally critical. I'm saying all wave properties are functions of matter. That is, electrons are smaller or bigger, things with orbits. You say the wave is built into the photon, which in my opinion is the simplest of all the organs in the universe's body. And that's a pretty big fucking goddamn difference. How can the Huygens-Fresnel principle be derived from the Maxwell equations? Well, that's a good question too, because again, Maxwell gets us back to electricity, and gets us back to magnetism, and gets us back to gravity, and gets me back to the point that these two slits are not the same as two slits separated from each other. As soon as there's these field influence, field dynamics take over, and fields are different. Anyway, it is noted that even the single photon electron is sent through either one of the slits, the two slits, one by one, the pattern predicted by the wave theory will be produced. Well, anyway, it looks like a far stronger evidence that the particles are being affected by the electron fields of the surfaces. Yeah, that's good. It's, of the slits to me. That's right. It's the 4 surface pattern, and the other one's the 2 surface pattern. Alright, one thing to remember is a sizable industry is built upon the lies, and, well, look, I'm not going to call these guys, so, you can have your conspiracy theory and all that stuff. I just think all these physicists have gotten too charmed with themselves. Most of the theoretical physics people don't even do any real work, and you goddamn know it. They never touch hardware, they never do an experiment themselves, so, I mean, it's all a crock of shit. But it's not an industry. I mean, obviously they're making a very good living fooling people into thinking they're really, really smart because they know all this obtuse math and all this complicated stuff, and look, I must be smart because I can make all this crap make sense. And they fool people. Obviously I don't think I'm wrong. No shit, Sherlock. You are the biggest ego on YouTube here. I think you don't believe in yourself is like saying that the Queen of England isn't royalty. Well, whatever. Who cares? I mean, realistically, any asshole who's on the internet talking, okay, should believe what they're saying. So if your theory is I should talk when I don't believe it, and that makes more sense, well, I say fuck you to that. I'm sick of assholes who with half opinions. The question is not what you think, but what the scientific community thinks of your theory. Well, again, they haven't had their theories tested, and obviously mine hasn't been tested. I would love to be able to face-to-face test them on their claims of gravitational lensing. I want deGrasse Tyson to sit there and explain to me exactly where he gets 100 meters per second gravity in the arm of a galaxy. Things about your theory so far. College students understand you are wrong and don't bother to inquire about your theory further. Well, you can keep saying things like that and we'll see what the future holds. I took 2 semesters of physics at college. Well, 2 semesters adds up to what? You did bowling balls, you did a little bit of gravity. How far do you get in 2 semesters? Did you get to 2 slit experiments in 2 semesters? I don't think you did. And even me can clearly see you are wrong. And your evidence is where? Where is the wrong? What sentence have I stated where something is wrong? You're not proving me wrong. You're not demonstrating me wrong. You're not showing any evidence that demonstrates me wrong. You're not showing a single experiment that I can't explain. So, fuck you. I can see that you have some seldom element of real physics in there with all the garbage. Well, again, what's part is garbage, jackass? And what is in there is real physics, is not much more than what you can expect from an autodidact who takes his information from viewing YouTube videos without taking any tests or exams. Well, anyway, why should any of that mean anything? And again, you're not really making an argument. You're just sitting there saying, I don't like your message. I'm going to shoot you because I don't like your message. You probably had some real physics back in high school, and your understanding did not rise over the paradigms they teach in high school. Well, again, the whole process has been completely videotaped. The whole 3-4 year process. The arguments I had with Piro 4 year, all that stuff's in videos right here. I make the claim that he says something. I say that doesn't make any goddamn sense, and I said, no, I spent the time, I researched, and I found the right answer. You stupid cunt. That's not my fault. Newtonian mechanics and kinetic theory of thermodynamics. On from these outposts, you construct a whole world view of physics where everything is kinetic and mechanical. Well, again, and I detail the entire construction. I went from gravity to velocity, to time dilation, to magnetism, to photons, to redshift. Yes, I did it. I diagrammed the entire fucking thing, and you're saying there's something about that process that's fake or phony. Fuck you. You never took college physics. Well, again, I watched MIT, I watched Stanford, and I watched Harvard. Harvard. Fuck you. Or Yale. Well, I can't remember which one it was. So please don't comment on quantum field theory and general relativity. Well, again, you're telling me what I'm allowed to do. Oh, fuck you in the ass. So until you prove I'm a liar or I've misrepresented the facts, you're a fucking slandering cunt. You don't have a clue what you're talking about. Well, you just said I had a clue, jackass, so you're not even consistent in your own fucking rhetoric, you stupid idiot. I may take a month or 2 more, and then you grow tired of the whole thing. Yeah, right, that's why I've spent at least, it's probably 4 years when you add it all up. I spent 4 years working on this in my spare time, so I haven't been watching movies, and I haven't done this, and I haven't been masturbating as much as I could have been. Instead, I've been watching boring, obtuse fucking lectures on these subjects, and you're going to sit there and say this kind of shit. I'm not going to grow tired of it, quite obviously, and now that I found the unified theory, I found the goddamn fucking holy grail of physics, why the fuck would I shut up then, you idiot? You won't then talk about it any longer and the topic forgotten, like the lawsuits you never brought up against Wikipedia. Well, again, I didn't sue Wikipedia, but clearly I could have, and I still can. Okay, so, but again, why would I want to get distracted over some stupid you know, what's the penalty going to be? There's not going to be any penalty. The victory will be won, and there won't be anything, you know, there won't be anything to celebrate. So what's the point? This is the crime of our world, is that the real criminals don't get punished. People can go to court and they can lie, and they never get prosecuted for perjury. I mean, we have a country that loves liars. So they won't punish these people. I, however, still be here and will remind you and everyone else that you have been wrong on physics as well. Well, I'm going to remind everybody that Logical Imperialist is a lying, slandering piece of scum. He hasn't demonstrated a single deception I've committed, and he hasn't made a single rational argument providing a single piece of evidence that in any way proves what I'm saying can't be true. Nothing. Too bad Miles Mathis isn't interested in dialogue, and he's written some pretty agreeable criticisms on fictitious current academic physics. Yeah, well, he's, you know, 50-50, right? With all the cranks, it's always kind of 50-50. Some of it's really good, some of it's, well. I mean, I think he wrote some kind of silly article about the, whatever, you know, the guy with ALS being fake. You know, like he died years ago and they put a fake crippled guy in his place. I mean, you're just like, why are you bothering with that kind of stuff, fella? I mean, that just blows your credibility right up, right? Neighbor's home. Gotta feed the cats. Anyway. Oh, yeah, so this was a useless Ken Fire in the Sky. Will you just go away, please? So he leaves a link to other crap. Oh, look. Pretty colors. I mean, obviously it demonstrates that the smaller the slit gets, the wider the pattern gets. And the wider the slit, the brighter the pattern, but it's not really a very good. It just creates more confusion, as if this actually happens in reality, and this, you know, there's no point in drawing it that way. I mean, that's not likely where the diffraction is happening. It's, you know, so it's not a very good projection. But anyway, see if there's any new comments. There we go. Ooh, more than one. Obviously, I don't think I'm wrong. Oh, he removed it. Good on you, Ken. I didn't have to do it for you. Very good. Probably ended up in spam. Let's see. What these guys don't realize is that what you came up with is completely based on things we know. Planck length, constant speed rule, and energy dependent. Yes, it's all based on the whole friggin' conservation thing, this whole field dynamics. I mean, you know, the gravity's made out of, in a sense, made out of magnetism and electricity, and the electricity is made out of magnetism and gravity, and the, you know, they're all such beautiful reciprocals of each other. They're just, you know, yeah. I mean, even the gravity thing, you know, when you think about the gravity thing, you know, creating the donut gravity, you know, having a donut, and the fact that there's no gravity in the middle. And it's just like charge. You know, charge does the same thing. You know, you can be in the Tesla, whatever, electricity cage. I don't think that's a Faraday cage, right? Tesla takes credit for shit that wasn't even his. I think it's Faraday did that, right? But, you know, that's the neat thing, right? I mean, gravity's doing the same thing. Gravity would, you know, the consequence of creating donuts is that, yeah, you could end up with no gravity on the inside. You know, very interesting. You know, that the center of the Earth, even though it's the place where it's being compressed by all the acceleration of all the matter on top of it, right? So it's under huge pressure, but the pressure it's under isn't gravitational pressure. It's entirely chemical pressure. Which is the same thing, but you know what I mean. It does just make the mind tumble a little to realize there's no gravity in the center of the Earth. You know. Gravity isn't causing the problem. It's the gravity on the outside of the Earth that's causing the problem at the center of the Earth. The pressure problem at the center is being created by the gravity on the crust of the Earth. But again, I'm just saying, which so much parallels electric charge. So anyway, I mean, it just all fits. These cunts are being such assholes about it. Like I said, if Feynman would have wrote what I wrote, everybody would just say, Feynman did it, he found a unified physics, Feynman did it, yay, everybody would be applauding all over the place. They would just be, oh, fucking yay, he has forever brain, nobody will ever be as smart as Feynman, he's the greatest man that ever lived, I mean, holy fucking shit, look what he did, blah, 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 blah. Invent him? No. Throw rocks at him. Really is depressing. Well, anyway, I'll read this.